Okay, so I don't hate this movie as much as I thought I did in college, but like it's still not great. It's pretty problematic, but shit, it's not Windows. So roll the fucking tape.
Let's pick these berries. Join us on a journey as we frolic through fields of filmmaking follies. Join us on this week's episode of Raspberry Fields Forever.
You suck.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Raspberry Fields Forever. I am your host, Jesse Rodden, and with me, as always, is my heterosexual life mate, Mr. Kieran Gibbs. Kieran, how you doing, buddy?
I am aggressively mid as per usual on most days. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing very well. I actually thought that you would be a little bit more down than that because we have a movie that you talk about very fondly of from your years at school. So I thought that you were going to have a little bit more aggression to your introduction there.
I've come to realize I've been in therapy for a minute, you see, and like there's certain amounts of energy you're supposed to exert in life and like an amount of negative energy you're supposed to exert and like spread. But I've already seen this movie. I've already exerted this negative energy up to this point. And then I watched it again and I realized this isn't all that getting worked up over for me anyway. I can see why other people might get a lot worked up over it because it is very not like, it's not copacetic in my eyes, but it's not the worst thing I've seen on the show. And I don't think it's the second worst thing we've seen on this show, if I'm being perfectly straight with you. But I also think we're being a little bit rude. We should introduce our first guests on Raspberry Fields Forever. Ladies and gentlemen, our very good friend, Jared Shamoon.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Jared, how are you doing, buddy? It's good to hear from you.
Good. I'm so excited to be a part of this podcast. I've been excited to join and just share my thoughts and opinions and everything.
Well, I think we have a really, really good one for you today because this one I pitched to you as, oh man, it's an Al Pacino movie. it's like Dog Day Afternoon meets Serpico. And I mean, I got to ask you, man, so what were your first thoughts that you had when you watched this film?
Am I allowed to curse on here?
Absolutely.
Gay shit. Just absolute gay shit. No kidding. No, my thoughts were I was hoping for more, if that makes sense. Like, this is a really interesting premise of detective work and murder mystery with queer culture thrown in, and I was expecting a lot more, but there were so many problems and derails, and it was not, no.
Well, that's good to know because I figured you would have, I figured you would think that they left it all out on the table, man, because like they went for it in this film. they didn't hold back, I don't really think.
Oh yeah. Well, when it came to the gay scenes, the gay shit, they did not hold back. And there were moments where I clutched my pearls and I said, Jesse and Kieran are true queer allies after watching this film, because they did some explicit things, some dangerous things that we should not talk about in a Christian household. No kidding. No, it was, I don't know. It was a lot. And I know the movie Bros came out recently, and I thought I was clenching my pearls a little through that because I'm like, oh my God, they're exposing so much about queer culture. And then over here I see this film and I'm like, this film went balls to the walls with gay sex.
Well, Kieran, I got to ask you the same question, man. What'd you think?
Well, again, this is one of the few films I have seen before this in this particular movie class. This movie is actually done by a director who's made a lot of movies that I really admire. His name's William Friedkin. He is most known for two films, arguably, The French Connection with Gene Hackman, and it has one of the most notable chase scenes of all time, and The Exorcist, which is one of its. Many people consider it the greatest horror film of all time. That's up for debate. It's very subjective, but it's
no way. He directed The Exorcist.
Yes, he directed The Exorcist, which those are two movies that I quite enjoy. He also made a movie that is at least taught in the queer cinema class that I took. I don't want to take any liberties and say that it's like iconically queer, but He made a film called The Boys in the Band that was made in like what 1970, 1971. And in my opinion, it's the perfect way to write a script just because it's so fucking snarky and insulty. And the way it's more, let me rephrase that. He didn't write it, but the way he directed it is he knows how to use space. And he's known how to use space for The Exorcist. He knew how to use space for The French Connection, because the thing about those particular movies is there's big set pieces and the location fucking matters. I'm going on a big tangent here. It was fine. I'm really sorry.
That's all right, man. That's all right.
Cruising, it was not as bad as I remember because I watched it in college and I thought it was really violent and I understood what it was trying to say and I didn't hate it. I respected what it was trying to say in some aspects, but I thought it was a little gritty. It's the same way I view sometimes I love a lot of Quentin's movies, but I think he's a little excessive in the way he beats like women and shit. That's kind of how I felt about this movie, but we'll get into that. So it's certainly not my favorite to go back and watch, but it's not the worst thing I've seen on the show.
And it's problematic too. I mean, it's definitely got its faults. I understand why you had to take a class, and this was a subject in the class, because this definitely is like a time capsule to show you what like people thought of queer culture back in that time. And it's not a great outlook because, they tried to, and I'm sure we'll go into this a little bit deeper later on, but they try to show this one little subsection of the homosexual culture and try to portray it as this is all of homosexual culture. And that is very problematic, because this is more of like a BDSM type culture in like a very niche subsection. I didn't know what to think of it whenever I first started watching it. I was like you, Kieran, where I thought that they had a lot that they wanted to say with the film, but I think that the way that they were trying to interpret it was just going about it the complete wrong way. And then once you slap that ending on it that they have, it really shows that they had really no idea where to take it. Like they didn't know how to put an end point on it. So they just said, audience, you guess. But anywho, we can actually talk about that more in our next segment, which we like to call God Save the Screen. Ow! God Save the Screen! Oh! In God Save the Screen, we like to talk about the plot of the film. We like to talk about what we like to call the meat and potatoes of the film. We want to get down to the essence. We want to go scene by scene and really dissect this film to really know where they went wrong with this and why it got nominated for the Razzies of the year 1980.
We've introduced 8 movies, you and me, done the plot. Jared, how did this movie start?
So this movie started out with a nice fisherman one morning out on the ocean, just chilling by the coast, looking out, and he sees this thing floating. This particular object, he probably thought it was garbage because pollution was probably very heavy back in those days. And he was like, I'm going to go pick that up. And then as they get closer, we see it's an arm. A dislocated arm from a body that was old, moldy, and gross.
That's exactly it. So they had this body part that they didn't know where it came from, and they were trying to pull prints from it. And like, this was not the first body part that they found. Like that's something that they established right off the bat. And then they have to put this arm on a little gurney thing with a whole bunch of other body parts that they don't know where they belong to, and just close it up. He's like, well, there's nothing we can do. We can't do nothing without the rest of the body. Like, what do you mean? That's kind of how this movie starts with a police officer who just really, really doesn't want to do his job.
Well, I mean, it's New York City cops, man. What do you expect?
Yeah, I don't know. You have to remember, like, the civil rights movement of people of color as well as queer people, like, was 1960s, like late 1960s. So, like, 1980s is not that far away from it. So you have to remember, like, officers are still shit, and they still are. But sorry.
No, you're fine. You're not wrong. So the police actually suspect somebody of doing these murders. They think they're all linked together, and they believe that they have a serial killer on their hands who's targeting gay men in like their neighborhood area, their West Village is what they call it, I believe. They hang out at a bar called the Eagle's Nest. I really like some of these bar names. I get it. It's
Yeah, same.
oh man, they were great. You had the Eagle's Nest.
Yes.
You had the Ramrod,
Oh yeah, I saw that one. I gagged. I was like,
and then you also had the Cockpit. Can't be any more on the nose that these are gay clubs.
Yeah, we like to stand out with our names.
After the morgue seems to go through all these body parts, and I'll give a little bit of kudos to the production designer, because it wasn't like, it was 1980, so they didn't have the best prosthetics in the world. But I buy that like a bloated limb. It looked like a raw chicken breast in a good way. Raw chicken breast in a good way. It's not something I thought I'd say today, but here we are. So after they're trying to figure out who's doing what, we cut to one of aforementioned bars, and the police are very, very harassingly interrogating these two appear to be sex workers. They
cross-dressers, I guess.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily define the exact roles of these two particular people, other than to be harassed by the New York City police force, which I think is a running theme in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Is that when we run into the cop who is the evil guy from Dumb and Dumber that ends up taking the pills?
Yeah, they look as if they're both brother and uncle simultaneously.
Yes. Very
they
much
do.
that.
Very predatory cops.
But we cut to inside the club, and it's just kind of a montage sort of thing going on. And that is a thing that, again, I really like about Friedkin's work, and it's something that I can appreciate about this movie, is the way and this is more might be a credit to the editor, but it's prevalent in all of his films. The way he cuts together his space, and the way he like makes the scene and the aura feel like you're actually in there. Like, you know, it's very frantic while you're in the club. But then we cut to a seemingly normal hookup after a encounter within the bar between one guy who looks a lot like Al Pacino, but he's not like Al Pacino.
Honestly, I thought it was Al Pacino.
And then you see this guy who's wearing like this weird like Halloween cop prosthetic, and he just it's a point of the movie that, again, I start to separate my enjoyment of it from it, because while I respect the artistry behind it, and you know, you can say that about most films, we see a very extended torturing and killing scene of this poor young man who happens to look just like Al Pacino. Pal Pacino is what I'm going to call him.
Al Pacino.
Pal Pacino, available at Circuit City. God damn it.
More like Party City, but continue.
Yeah, you're right. This scene is so graphic because he ends up tying him up, and this is after they actually like have some type of intercourse. I don't know if it was just like, you know, mouth stuff or if they actually did something. But
you're weirdly into the semantics.
I think
it's cool.
I think there was intercourse because of the motion of their shoes going up onto the bed, because why not?
He's bare ass, so that's all the assumptions you really need to make, but go on.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So anyways, he ties him up, and then he starts stabbing him repeatedly. And like, you don't, and it's not like a psycho moment, leave it up to your imagination type thing. Like, nah, they're showing like penetration with a knife and stuff like that. So, I mean, and not to mention they're showing the thrusting and motions like that and stuff, which, I mean, you know, talk about starting the movie off with a bang, you know?
Right.
And it
that was
just,
a bad fucking pun. That was a bad fucking get out.
I was hoping you wouldn't catch it.
Yeah, I didn't. I just was like, ah.
And then you gotta work harder than that to get past old Ironsides. Might be a stuttering prick, but he'll catch your jokes.
Well, and they're intercutting this as well with like these cops who are harassing these cross-dressers in the back of their cop car. And these cross-dressers are like, you know, kind of getting weirded out and they don't want to be there and they keep telling them that they want to leave. And it's that weird dynamic of like, we're going to call you gay and we're going to call you all these names, but we're going to get you to blow us, but that doesn't make us gay. And that whole like dynamic, which I mean, I've seen it in the culture and stuff like that. You know, it's kind of that gray area that I think a lot of guys like have for whatever reason. But
well, at that point you're entering into hyper toxic masculinity and how they power dynamics and like what they view as like lesser, as what they view as like themselves as above something and lesser than. It's this really symbolic way of looking at shit.
And the thing is like it is very common that there are a lot of trans and non-binary people and people with different gender expressions that, I mean, it is hard to evaluate, like, now that we know more as a queer culture of, like, who we are and where we're going, looking back at these films, we don't know if these people were trans or non-binary or just with different gender expressions, but it is very common to see that there are a lot of toxic men who want to take advantage of individuals, especially people they have this weird like kink of like this power dynamic of, especially with cross-dressers or trans women, that is completely abusive and not validating at all and not consensual at all. And I want to say it's like this inner working mind of this toxic man trying to figure out who he is within his possibly sexual expression and self-identity, but I don't know for sure.
Yes. And then that's when we get like, once the murder happens and these cross-dressers are presumed sexually assaulted, that's whenever we cut and we're starting to see Al Pacino. We're starting to see our main character. And we notice, I noticed right away that he looked exactly like the guy who was just murdered. I could see that's kind of where they were going with it. And that's when we first see Paul Sorvino.
Well, rest in peace, first of all. He passed very recently. Polly Walnuts and Ray Liotta passed in the same year. What a fucking day. I hate it. But yeah, they're standing over the corpse of this poor guy, which if you're Al Pacino, you got to think like you're staring into a mirror of your own fucking corpse, essentially, or at least like your boss is. And I don't know if it's necessarily ethical to be like, hey, you know, this guy who looks just like you who got stabbed, let's go ahead and send you out in the field to get
honest.
And the way he asked too was just really weird. He brought Al Pacino into his office and he's just like, you ever let a man suck a cock? You ever got turned on by another man? He's like, where are you going with this, sir?
I just imagine the character from South Park be like, so where does he touch you? Like, pulls out the doll.
Show me on the doll.
And that's exactly it. He's like telling him, you know, he wants him to go undercover into this like gay nightlife scene, and he's letting him know, you know, this isn't just like your normal everyday gay people. These are like BDSM places, and you know, you'll have to really be deep in undercover, and you'll have to do things that you may not deem that you want to do, but you know, you have to do it for, you know, us to catch this serial killer.
Wait, sorry, not to cut you off, but like, do you remember, speaking of South Park, wasn't there an episode where like the officer goes undercover to stop crime?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Take off your pants.
I definitely. It's the same. You fucking pointed it out, buddy. It's the same goddamn concept.
Please, I'm a cop, buddy. Here, give me that bag so I can dispose of this evidence. You should be ashamed of yourselves.
Something I need to point out is that in the lead up to, because their plan is to send him deep undercover, like he's gonna like have his badge taken away, assume a completely different identity, have a crappy little apartment in the East Village, like smack dab in the middle where the crime's going. But before that, we get him in his nice little cop uniform, and it's just really funny because he looks like.
Well, and we also have to show that he's sexually aggressive with his girlfriend, you know, like he gets in there, you know.
Well, that's later on in the film. At the beginning, where right after he gets this assignment, he's just cuddling her in bed, be like, it kind of was like him like saying his death wishes to her in a way, like, babe, I may have to become gay for you. Like, like this is what?
It's that don't ask, don't tell scenario.
Yeah.
You don't want to know how many dicks I had to suck to get us here.
Hey, I put bread on this table by sucking cock.
Like, I feel like the entire vibe of the scene, every like scene with him and his girlfriend. Have you guys ever seen Pop Star with Andy Samberg? This was made in 2016, so it was shot in 2015. And if I'm not mistaken, 2015 was the summer that gay marriage was legalized.
Right.
So they shot that when that happened. And so one of the songs that Andy Samberg made was like a pro LGBTQ like standard pop song.
It was like a Macklemore parody.
It's like a Macklemore parody, essentially. But every other line, he's just like, I'm not gay. But if I was, I would support equal rights.
Thriller in the middle, but they're really not gay. Not gay. And then they also had Pink come in on this track. And yeah, it was good.
And anywho, that joke ties together if you've seen the movie, because that's what we do here. We regurgitate what we've seen, we vaguely quote it, and then we call it content. Welcome to the fucking club. How you doing?
Podcasting. So where did we leave off? So yes, he ends up taking the assignment and he goes and tells his girlfriend, that he's going to be doing this undercover stuff. He's not going to be able to see her very often. He'll try to get to her when he can, but understand that he's doing this for her and it's all going to be good in the end, that type of thing. And then he ends up going to his shitty apartment and he starts exploring that world, right? Essentially is what he's doing. He's starting to try and figure it out. He gets his apartment and it's kind of like this rundown place. And then his neighbor is also a gay man. And so he ends up showing him around town basically and kind of showing him, where a place to eat was. And they end up having conversations, end up building a friendship essentially. And
it's Detective Burns, who I can't quite. Do you remember the undercover name he gave, Jared?
Oh, John Forbes, or
yeah, I think it was John Forbes, something like that. But his name is Detective Burns. He goes by John Forbes. But his neighbor is named Ted, and he has a boyfriend named Gregory, who's a fucking asshole.
Yeah.
We have he's fuck you, Gregory. You're a dancer. Get a real job.
Especially with that nasty ass hair that he had. That he's like, I want to be Fabio, but then the grosser version of Fabio.
It's weird what was considered because I love Al Pacino, and as a skinny fat man myself, I can say that it's not easy having that body frame. But I wish I was alive in the 80s because me and Al Pacino aren't that far apart. And he is viewed as like a sex symbol at this period. So go him, I guess.
Very true.
Well, I would like to know how they pitched this movie to Al Pacino to get him to be in it.
Well, he was an artist at that point, he was doing flicks Dog Day Afternoon has a lot of queer themes in it. And
right. Well, I mean, I'm just saying even not even that, it's just this movie was not really well written and stuff like that. So I feel like someone had to pitch it to him like that. I know I mentioned it in the kind of the intro or whatever, but I feel like someone had to have pitched it to him like, this is Dog Day Afternoon meets Serpico. You're going to go in undercover, but you're going in undercover to be a gay man. And you can portray that gay man very well. You learn to be the gay man.
Well, I don't know. And I feel like it might be a bit of a problematic thing where every actor kind of wants to challenge themselves by channeling that. It's a bit marginalizing, to view that your sexual orientation is something other that you can portray for glory. I don't know.
Right. I don't know. It's one of those things. It's this is definitely going back to the times of right now we're talking about needing representation in the media. And so this ties back straight actors playing gay men or bi-curious men. And by any means, an actor should be able to play characters and play them to the fullest and be able to bring the human aspect out in that character. But at the same time, we need to be more inclusive in the arts at the same time. So it's
a weird, it is a balance.
Yeah.
I do apologize, but what I do need to point out is Al Pacino's hair. Let's talk about that for a second.
You want to talk about hair? I want to talk about the hair that happened in this film in the 80s because there were so many hairstyles that I saw that looked like yours, Kieran's, and I thought I was like, Kieran, when did you show up? Like, hello?
You know what, Jared?
It's like, Kieran.
Middle name Shamoon. I'm gonna come to your house. I'm gonna buy you a welcome mat, and it's gonna have a quirky saying on it. But the quirky saying is clearly gonna be like Etsy'd, so it's just gonna be like 89 degrees instead of a slick 90. But you're gonna be too nice to fucking throw it away or ever give it away just in case I come over. So you're just gonna have to have that crooked fucking doormat all the fucking time.
That is evilly awesome.
I would have never thought that in a million years as a retort, and I love that.
I'm gonna fucking kick your ass, Jesse.
I call him Dewey Cox all the time on this podcast, so I thank you for pointing that out.
Jesse, I don't care if you have to edit out my track because I talked over you. I am going to kick your ass. I wanted to dress up as Dewey Cox for Halloween this year, but then that stupid Elvis movie came out, which I like Austin Butler, but everybody would have thought it was Elvis. Anywho, stop.
Everybody's like, "Oh, his breakout role," and I'm like, "Dude, he was in Yoga Hosers."
He was in Austin. No, not Austin and Alley. What was it? Hannah Montana.
Yeah, he was in Hannah Montana, but he was also in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, so that's okay.
He's in the only good part of that movie.
Hey! I like that movie.
There's an hour and a half, and there's a good hour and a half movie in there.
You shut your fucking mouth.
There's a great hour and a half in there.
Our protagonist, Al Pacino, Officer Steve Burns, is going undercover. He's going to these different nightclubs and stuff and starting to scope out the scene. And he's starting to kind of get a feel for like what certain nights are. Like he shows up one night and it's like everybody's in cop uniforms and like tweaking nipples and stuff like that. Just and someone comes up to him and is like, "Hey, you got to go."
Don't make that noise again. don't.
Well, I love that they have these two guys come up to him and are like, "You're not here for tonight. This is precinct night."
Oh, yes. I saw that. I was like, what? Okay. And
that we don't like your kind around here.
Are you tough enough to be in the salty spittoons? Love it. No, he's starting to kind of figure it out. He's kind of getting hit on by a few guys, and yes, and he does poppers at some point, or like something. Like they're doing poppers in this film. Did you know this?
I didn't see any poppers myself. Did you see? I saw other people doing drugs. I didn't see Al Pacino do drugs.
Well, his eyes are red as fuck. I don't think they ever see him do it on camera, but they're alluding to that he's doing all the drugs because have you seen it?
Yeah.
But I do remember at one point somebody offers to pee on him.
Oh yes, because he was wearing they did the hanky code in this.
Please explain the hanky code.
The hanky code is real. Wherever you position your hanky and what color it is does resemble what kind of kinks or sexual behaviors you enjoy. And yellow being pissed, that was part of it. And so that's why he was like, "So you into piss play?" And with blowjobs being blue and all this other stuff, as well as the moments that you see in the clubs a lot. Like, granted, it is a subsection of queer culture. It is very much like that at some gay bars where like you are being exposed to a lot of like kinks and like a lot of fun and sexual exploration and stuff like that.
Which, hey, to each their own in that situation.
Right.
But they made it, that's the only thing that was my gripe with this film is that they, within the prism of this box that they were showing us, every single gay person was this like just overly aggressive, just horny all the time, like always in leather, this stereotype caricature of a homosexual man.
Oh yeah, I mean, but back then, like 80s being very aggressive, especially in the times, like it helped a lot of. It was a way out to like get pain and pleasure and kind of escape the reality of what they're suffering externally. So it was interesting times. It still happens actually today. Like I said, I used to work at the Dallas Eagle. Like you see people in harnesses. Like that is a lot of like gay night culture, especially like for Halloween that just recently passed. Like a lot of people joke that gay men's Halloween costumes is this and a harness always. Like it's so funny.
Like canonically, well, I say canonically, like discursively, like in real life, that was a big sort of point of backlash. And we're going to get into that because it doesn't let off the gas pedal in this sort of violence, because it is portraying these cultures like through this fucking lens of it portrays them the same way. Like you brought up the salty spittoon, and that is the perfect comparison. Like it,
Yeah.
and it's dehumanizing, and that is the biggest problem for me with this movie, because again, it wasn't made by straight people. Well, it wasn't made by all straight people because it was 1980 and it was mostly white dudes. But it still feels a little problematic.
Oh yeah, no, you're seeing a scope of the messiness and the brokenness of the LGBT community being shown, where like it was scary being queer, and we took a lot of there's a lot of kinks that I feel like a lot of kinks came from that, and now it's more sexual play, but at that time I bet it was something different.
Right. Well, and I mean, in the end, whatever happens between two consenting adults is their fucking
Right.
business.
Oh,
But or
absolutely.
I shouldn't say two consenting adults. However many consenting adults.
True.
At this point, Pacino's got a hunch. There's this waiter. He's got a vibe on him. So he tells his police chief, well, he leans on him to interrogate him. And at this point, it gets, again, it's just the hyper violence, but then hyper violence against that particular community. And that's when Pacino starts to see, like, oh, maybe the police force is kind of fucked up, and it's fucked up toward particularly marginalized communities, which is a message, again, that I respect that this movie is trying to tell.
Right.
Yes, and that's a respectful message that it's trying to tell. But I'm curious on both of y'all's interpretation of the subplot that's going on with him and his fiance, girlfriend, what have you, because it starts off with them having sex and them totally being in love with each other, and then as he gets deeper into this culture, he starts finding that he can't perform with his girlfriend anymore, and she's asking him questions like, why haven't you touched me and stuff, and we haven't gone there, and he's kind of giving her the runaround with it. So it's that implication that, like, because he's around gay culture, he's now like starting to like men and not women. Same thing with like the scene where he's not dancing with anybody, he's not like embracing anybody, and then all of a sudden that one guy sends him out to the dance floor, and then he kind of busts loose, right? So I want to get y'all's thoughts on that. Like I found it very problematic, just because it's the whole idea that, like, oh well, if you're around a bunch of gay people, you can it'll turn you gay, that type of thing. And
Right.
I didn't like that at all.
No, same. I was gonna say it's one of those things. It's this, like I said, tying back to this being very much of a horror murder mystery, like in the sense, but dealing with queer culture, gay culture. Like I think honestly, like a straight person watching this, or like back in the day watching it, like that probably was and still is sadly the fear of, like, if I hang around gay people, they'll hit on me. If I hang around gay people, they will um do this and this and make you feel uncomfortable. But so like seeing this as like their fear, like that you can obviously become gay or bisexual or whatever just by knowing other queer people is insane, because I've been around mostly straight people all my life until recent, and I've been very gay. In fact, I thought I was still straight for a long time. It wasn't until I was 21 that I was like, you know what? Something's different about me. I should be honest.
That's good, and that's what it's all about, is finding your true self. and from here we get into him thinking that it's this one guy. So he ends up setting up a sting operation where like he's going to basically kind of bait him into, going back to this house, and they're listening in on the radio and stuff. You can hear him ask about tying him up. That was my first indication that this isn't the killer, obviously, because like if you're asking him to tie you up, and most of your victims up to that point were tied up before they were killed and everything in this BDSM way, and he was so hesitant that's whenever I would have pulled the plug on and said, all right, no, this isn't what it's supposed to be. This isn't the guy. And no, he ends up like coaxing them into like tying them up and stuff, and like they're about to get into it, and then the cops, like, I love how the cops entered because they didn't like break the fucking door down, get the fuck on the ground. It was like they're all at the door, and then they just barely tap on it.
Oh yeah, because they didn't want to see what was happening behind that door. They were like, "Are they dressed yet? Are they good?"
and then I want to know how much they paid Al Pacino to get hogtied like that, naked on that bed.
Oh yeah, he was completely butt naked?
Yeah, that was truly Al Pacino because they didn't cut away from it,
Right. Oh.
He is an artist,
He is an artist.
It was after the 70s. It was after Hollywood's nervous breakdown at that point. Everybody was getting naked on it. I'm pretty sure.
True.
Pretty sure Nicholson had done a bare ass. It's an artist thing.
Kirk Douglas in Saturn III went full man ass. So
that is this. You're correct. This is the second legendary actor man ass we've had on this particular program. If you haven't watched Saturn III, Jared, it is aggressively mid.
Will do.
Then they go back to the precinct, and then they start interrogating the two guys. And they're really just Al Pacino's character. They really got him in the interrogation room just to kind of play it off that like he wasn't part of it. He's still in his undercover persona, and they are hammering this other guy for information. Just say, you fucking did this, you look at this picture, this guy, you've seen this. And this guy's like, I had no idea, I don't fucking know, he picked me up, I didn't pick him up, and he wanted me to tie him up, and blah blah blah. And you can just see on Al Pacino's face like, this isn't the guy. And then the funniest part, I'm sorry, this had me busting a huge gut when this big fucking Ving Rhames looking motherfucker
yes,
walks in with nothing but a jock strap and a cowboy hat and doesn't say a fucking word. He just goes up and slaps the shit out of Al Pacino and walks out of the room. I laughed so fucking hard. Oh my God.
Oh, no. So it was funny because that scene looked so familiar to me. And I said, why does the scene look so familiar to me? Because they referenced it in the current American Horror Story New York. So,
oh, really?
I was like, why does it? Yeah.
How do they do that?
They have the same size motherfucker come up and just slap the shit out of the guy they were interrogating. I was like, okay. Jockstrap and everything.
Nice. They probably did pull it from this film because they're like, nobody watched this.
I did.
They pull Al Pacino out of the room and like give him a break, and then they pull him into the same room with the black man in the cowboy hat that just smacked the shit out of him. And this guy still doesn't say a word to Al Pacino as he's like going over there and like looking at his face. And he smacked the shit out of him.
We call a one-take Jake.
Didn't he go up to his cowboy hat too and take his cowboy hat off him and throw it?
Oh yeah, like throw it out the window. Yeah.
And that was really like the only comedy beat within this entire freaking film.
I didn't find to be fair, Jesse, I didn't find a whole lot of room for jokes there.
Well, no, for sure. But the fact...
Oh, you can still make some jokes.
Well, but the fact that was the time that they chose to make just a random fucking joke of the whole situation,
Right.
Because it was just one of those like moments of like he comes in and slaps him, and then the guy's just looking at the cops like, "Are you fucking just gonna let this happen?" I didn't see anything. But they start to realize that this obviously isn't their guy, and he has to go back out on the streets, and he doesn't want to go out on the streets, so he has to have that like sidebar with Paul Sorvino and talk about the fact that it's getting to him, man. It's changing him, and he don't know what he's doing anymore, and he wants out. And Paul Sorvino ends up like changing his mind about that and telling him, we're almost done. You gotta help us out. And then immediately like gives him his next assignment. He just like snatches it and walks off. He's like, fuck you.
His commissioner was like, here, look at this. This is the students that were in his class. And so that's probably, he was looking to see who looked familiar, and then took the trip over there because he noticed there was, they referenced a scene that he saw of the guy at the bar, and then goes over to Colombia and studies him, you can say.
Yeah, because he ends up breaking into his apartment essentially, and like it's a hot summer in New York or whatever, so they has the fan on the window, and he pops it out, and then no, I'm sorry, they had one more comedy beat in this because he ends up setting that fan down, like trying to be quiet and stuff, and then all of a sudden the fan just drops and he has to jump.
Oh yes. I hope he got a shot after that. He probably got tetanus or something with that fan, that gross rusty fan.
Yeah, dude, it was nasty. And then he finds notes because this guy that he was following was working out with, I guess, his roommate, and was talking about his dad and how he needed to go see his dad, and was talking about how his dad's such an asshole and like is thinking about cutting him off and stuff. And whenever Al Pacino is in his apartment, he finds in his closet a shoebox that is full of like these letters, and you don't know necessarily what the letters are to until the very end of the film. It starts to lead him to think that this is the guy. And this is a guy that he actually met previously. He tried to pick him up, remember, earlier in the film, and like followed him out in the alley and stuff, and was like, you want to go somewhere? And he was like, no, I think I'm all right. And he kind of chickened out because that was whenever he was first getting into the scene.
Oh yeah.
And that's whenever they kind of set something up with him. He knows it's that guy now, and there's this spot in the park that
oh yeah.
Okay, Jared, I have to ask, man, is this part of gay culture as well? Is there like places within the park that people go to?
Yeah. So
really?
if you're in a gay city, I believe from what I've heard from some of my gay friends, cruising still does happen. So this movie wasn't named Cruising just to be like funny. Like gay cruising is an actual thing where you can go to the park, you stroll down the street, you see if anyone's like, like that wants to fuck and have sex in the park, and you do it there. Sometimes you go back to the bar or wherever. So that is actually very real.
Wow. Well, I was actually going to bring this up in our it's the end of the Flag as we know it segment, because we kind of throw in some facts, but you just said it, so I want to throw it in there now. So Cruising, and the reason why it was named Cruising. Kieran, did you know why it was named Cruising?
I mean, I use my context clues, and not for nothing, but I have seen plenty of heterosexual blowjobs in parks, mind you.
True.
Gay thing, Jesse Rodden.
Well, the reason why they named this film Cruising, it's a double entendre because it describes both police officers on patrol and men who are cruising for sex.
Yep.
So there you go, which kind of sums up this film. Good title choice, I would say. I think that's probably the only thing I'd give this film.
We're close to the end. Like they finally pin the guy, basically.
That's right. So yes, they are at the park, and Al Pacino knows that it's this guy, so he's kind of looking for him and looking for a way to catch him.
Find the knife, yeah.
Yeah, and so he finds him and he like takes him out to the woods, and he's like, let's go do some stuff. And then I think the guy pulls out his knife, right? He's like, take off your pants. Al Pacino starts to like mess with them, and they're doing the thing, and then all of a sudden he's about to stick him with the knife, and then Al Pacino has his own knife and sticks him with his, and so it's that moment of like, who stabbed who first?
A little bit of tension. Maybe Al Pacino's dead. Maybe he survived. Who knows?
Yeah. It's okay. He almost had to suck a dick, but ended up having to stab a guy.
That's actually kind of funny to think about.
Chose to murder somebody over sucking a dick. That's homophobia. All right.
Ah, no, that's thankfully we're becoming more of a welcoming generation, but definitely at that time being, it seems more manly to stab someone than suck a dick. So
and that's, I think, what this underlying problem with this film is, that I feel that, like, looking at it from our perspective in our generation, in this time, in this current light,
yeah.
this movie looks very problematic for a lot of reasons. But I feel like this movie, when it came out, and the reason why it probably didn't do very well, is because of homophobia.
Well, it managed to piss off both sides of the aisle was the thing.
Yeah.
You weren't going to get the general population, particularly in the 1980s, particularly in the early 1980s, right when the moral majority was right about to take over. And it also pissed off the burgeoning queer cinema community in like the wake of fucking God, what's his name? Andy Warhol. And like Andy Warhol and fucking John Waters flicks. Like you also pissed off that community. So they really shot themselves in the foot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because it seems like they had a lot to say. They just didn't go about it very well.
I understand that Paul Sorvino's hand really does look like a ham, but that's no reason to be ham-fisted.
Yeah.
Speaking of fisted, so there was a scene.
Child, I did not know if we were gonna. Yes.
They imply fisting, and I don't think we will ever have another movie on this podcast that references fisting.
It's a very all-encompassing medium, so I doubt that this is the last time we come across fisting. Fisting is in discourse.
Oh, child, I saw that moment, and I'm aware of what it is, and I know at a lot of like there are a lot of like gay sex positive clubs where like they have like live sex on the thing, and sometimes they do have fisting done. I was just not expecting it to be in a film. I was not expecting that. And yeah.
And that's why I say this film did not stray. It did not fear going there.
No.
He was in the same class as like your Kenneth Angers of the world.
The pacing of this film was completely off to a T because I felt like they were trying to jam in so much like gay scenes and then do this murder mystery, but then like him just standing at a gay bar and then more murder scenes. Or I was like, where is this going? Like, why?
Well, why did we have to take that entire side storyline of his neighbor's boyfriend coming into the picture?
Right, yeah.
Why did we go there? And then we have to have this like, oh, he's my boyfriend, but he's been seeing you, so yeah, I think he's cheating on me with you, so we're going to get into this fucking like bitch fight over a guy.
Right.
Well, the reason that doesn't make it good, but the reason they brought it up is because they wanted to light a seed that this Gregory guy is maybe slightly unhinged, because after Al Pacino seems to apprehend the confirmed serial killer, I think his name's Stuart.
Stuart. What are we gonna do, Stuart? Stuart.
They take him back to the station. The denouement of the film is about to happen. We have almost reached the end, folks.
Yes. And we need to talk about this because I still don't know what actually happened at the end of this film.
No, same. No, but what Kieran was saying was actually maybe closer to what I think we were missing. Continue, because I think you're onto something.
Well, I have severe ADHD, guys, so you fucked me up awfully.
No, you were saying that's the reason why they introduced the boyfriend.
Yeah, they introduced this guy and they wanted him to seem like an abusive guy. Or like an abusive partner, because we're entering the denouement of the film, and Stuart, who his fingerprints come back, they finally get the fingerprints match back, because this was, back then, so fingerprint technology wasn't what it was, but they finally got some fingerprints off of him, so he killed somebody.
Right.
But then, after all is said and done, Ted's dead, ladies and gentlemen. The neighbor from the house And the cops get there and they just chalk it up to, oh, lovers quarrel because Gregory was an asshole, even though there's a murderer on the loose and you might have arrested some guy, but some guy just happened to get murdered right after that. And they chalk it up to lovers quarrel and they arrest Gregory. And then at the end of the film, Al Pacino is back with his girlfriend,
wife,
reassuming the heteronormative stance in life that he should, quote unquote.
Right. When he has overcome.
Yeah, exactly. The gay has not caught him today.
That Tom Cruise scene from Family Guy. You can't catch me, gay thoughts.
Tom Cruise won't come out of the closet.
Now I'm in this closet with Tom Cruise. Mom, John Travolta won't come out of the closet, and Tom Cruise is in there too.
Tom, come out the closet. Oh my God.
The gay thoughts have caught up with him because the leather jacket and the sunglasses, his girlfriend happens to put them on.
Right.
Two tokens of the lifestyle that he has seemingly, quote unquote, escaped. The queer trap, if you will, which sounds like a really fun place to buy drugs.
Yes.
So he sees his girlfriend in a leather jacket and sunglasses, two things that we have commonly associated with the cruising lifestyle, and he doesn't know what to think. And then he just stares at the camera, and then we close on the same fishing port we opened on, and then fucking end of the movie. Did he kill the guy?
See, yeah, that's the thing is I don't know. Is it Greg that killed him or is it Al Pacino that killed the guy in the end? Because we know it wasn't the guy that was arrested, but I feel like the guy who was arrested was the serial killer because he had the knife.
Yeah, and he was set ready to kill him. But Jared, I just wanted to ask your opinion on this because honestly, the movie would have been better if it had ended where they had apprehended the guy. It wouldn't have been amazing in my opinion, but I feel like it really just kind of accents or rather vindicates the killer queer sort of stereotype that was really rampant, particularly in early cinema, and something that was trying to down. I
see what you're saying now, kind of like Sleepaway Camp and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I see what you're saying. I don't know if they were going with that per se angle, if that makes sense. Because when you look at movies like Psycho and Sleepaway Camp, where the antagonist or the villain is quote unquote someone who is queer or different, this one is a little bit all over the place. I felt like it wasn't really like those films where you were against you, but this one was seeing kind of the brokenness and the default of the gay scene and seeing where toxic masculinity really plays a hand in questioning if you're gay, are you really a man? Which is why you see the excessive machonism in the gay bars and the BDSM and stuff like that. This one, I feel like with the murderer is more of the hurt person in the community, if anything, that is trying to take power back. But yeah.
It just, to me, it doesn't show that they had a lot of faith in their original premise.
Oh, yeah.
Because they didn't, it just shows that they didn't like how the movie had wrapped up. So they just wanted to shoehorn this extra kill in there to leave this question mark at the end of it. It's thin question mark.
Right. It felt like, yeah.
It just felt like it almost was that Friday the 13th type ending where it's we didn't really have a lot of faith in the ending of her just being on the canoe and then we fade out with her on the canoe. No, we had to have Jason come up at the very last second and pull her down. That's kind of where it left me, was well, I see where you were trying to go with this film, but I think it would have landed better if you would have just ended with once they found out who the killer really was and he had stabbed him and then he went to go live his normal life. I don't think you needed that question mark at the end of it.
I think they were sequel baiting before sequel baiting was a thing. Cruising 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Cruising 2, Cruise Control.
No, but that Cruise Control.
He dumps the lob.
I do feel like there were too many cooks in this kitchen and a lot of rewrites that explains why there was so many moments. You're like, okay, where's this going? And it just went nowhere. Especially because I felt the first half and the second half were two completely different films in some ways.
No, I agree with you. It's divided in what it's wanting to say. What is it trying to say about queer culture? Is it showing queer culture as being a victim, or are they showing queer culture as being, that killer queer scenario? And that's where
Right.
I think that they completely left turn this thing and just made it completely off. Like, that's the reason why I think that, like you were saying, it was so divisive between both groups. Like, your very conservative groups didn't like this film, but your homosexual community didn't like this film either. So, like, it was caught between a rock and a hard place because it didn't really know what it wanted to
Right.
say.
It felt like, in its execution anyhow, I feel like it had good intentions, but the execution really it felt like it was made for kind of nobody. I don't know, and I could be wrong. I'm not the eater of worlds. I'm not fucking Galactus. I don't have all, like, I don't know why Galactus was the first omnipotent being. I could have said God, but same difference. Uh,
One's as real as the other. So
I wasn't gonna go there. My mom still thinks I'm Christian. You know how you lie to your parents? Oh, cut that out.
I think that takes us to the end of this segment, which brings us to our next segment, which we like to call the Can't Buy Me Love Critics Reviews of the Day. It's the Can't Buy Me Love Reviews of the Day. Come on, let's hear them out.
Aw, hell nah.
In the Can't Buy Me Love Critic of the Day, we like to hear other people's opinions. We like to give a voice to the voiceless, like a crappy cinema CM Punk. There's a tiny bit of alliteration for you. Jesse, what do you got?
See, you just take every moment that you can to plug your other podcast, don't you?
Oh my
wrestling
God.
fans.
You mentioning professional wrestling does not negate the existence of Raspberry Fields forever. You insecure little Mark.
Ooh.
How dare you cheat on me with another podcast, Kieran?
Well, guess what? I haven't made one of those because Justice won't stop doing plays.
That's fair.
He's going to be in a Christmas Carol.
Oh, nice.
Kinney Theater. Check it out.
Cool.
Okay.
My critic review that I was able to scrounge up, I actually had to go to Amazon to find a positive review, but I was surprised to note that on Amazon, surprisingly, this movie holds a 4.5 star rating, and that's out of 1,499 reviews. So that's a good pool of people.
You can go on.
This one was written by a user named Nero with 3 X's in front of her name and 3 X's behind her name.
That means the name was not available, so she.
And she put this review out September 28th of 2004. A Glimpse of a Lost World is her title. Despite all the bad press and bad reviews this movie received, I actually mostly liked it. Granted, it's not going to go down in history amongst Pacino's finest films or characters, but it really is not that bad of a film, and certainly worth seeing at least once. If nothing else, it has rather inadvertently become a glimpse into a lost world. The heavy leather S&M gay subculture that flourished on both coasts in the era shortly before the onset of AIDS disseminated these communities. Many, if not nearly all of the men seen in this film are depictions of a time we will never see again.
Oh, that is true.
They gave it a 4-star out of 5-star rating, which, they weren't wrong in what they said. I just don't think they, especially since this was written in 2004, I don't think they were really looking at it through a different lens, and kind of how it was portraying gay culture, and I don't think they caught the whole killer queer of it all at the very end. So, throughout the entire film, because let's be honest, the psychopathic killer was a homosexual themselves, and he said, you made me do this.
Yeah.
I have 2 reviews. I have one from, I found them both on Rotten Tomatoes, but they are from external sources. The first one is from, you might have heard of the guy, his name's Roger Ebert. His name's Roger Roger Ebert, motherfucker, Jesus Christ, Roger Ebert. His name is Roger Ebert.
Name is Robert Paulson.
Fuck off. All right, Robert. Jesus Christ. Roger Ebert from the Chicago Sun-Times wrote back in 2014, what we're left with is a movie without the courage to declare itself. Gave it a 2.5 out of 4. That was from about 7 years ago, or at least that's when it was reported. It could have been when it came out. I cannot be bothered to look. I have a secondary review that I was bothered to look because it had less information on the prompt. It's from a guy called Kyle Turner over at them.us. It's a pretty succinct review, and it was listed on the top 50 LGBTQ plus horror film of all time. It didn't show me what position, and I didn't want to read the article, so we're just going to go ahead and have a little look-see. He said, it reveals a shrewd perspective on desire, identity, and fascism in America. You just have to look, which I think are both valid arguments.
Honestly, now that you mention it, I kind of see it.
Yeah, well, think of all of what they were wearing and stuff like that too. Like they look like they were all dressed like Nazi generals in some way, shape, or form. It was kind of weird with all the leather clad stuff.
It's a total power dynamic for sure.
Well, you can also extrapolate a critique of the police force out of it, particularly the NYPD, which, I
mean, the fact that morale police were around for quite a while, which caused the Stonewall riots. I mean, riot is something. Like the fact that people are policing behavior instead of actual like inhumane justice is shocking.
No, and particularly in that era. And this is only what, 11 years after Stonewall? A little over.
Yeah, literally.
Oh my God, yeah.
So it's, I think it's kind of brave in some aspects, but I do think it's valid to say that it doesn't necessarily stick by itself. And I also can say that there is play, and I also do agree with the sentiment that it is there if you look, but I am a little bit dumb, so maybe I have to have things explained to me sometimes.
Well, okay. I'm that person that loves going to like A24 films because I love like when they do horror and do like all this stuff, because I take my binoculars and I like do this because I love like trying to find all the hidden stuff that they are adding to make the story even more than meets the eye. And there's so much that A24 does. So I get that. I do like a film that makes me sit there and think and piece things together. I wouldn't say so much with this film. This film was a little bit like, in the sense, like scattered plot. So like I couldn't really, the flow of the storytelling was so off that I couldn't enjoy it, if that makes sense.
Well, Jared, since you're the first guest on Raspberry Fields Forever, and since coming to the end of the Can't Buy Me Love Critic of the Day, do you think you could do me a favor and give us a little Can't Buy Us Love critic review? And the rating scale is going to be, for this particular portion, we're going to have you do another rating scale later because we're pretentious, or at least I am. But can you give me about a haiku's worth of syllables on a review on how you feel about it, and rate it out of 6 Pacino butts?
6 Pacino butts. God. I'm going to say at this very moment, I'll probably change later, but maybe like 2.5 to 3 Pacino butts.
Okay.
Because I will say this, it wasn't the worst thing I've seen. I've seen a lot worse films, and films that were trying too hard. This film, I think, was trying to do its own thing, but got lost in what it was trying to do at the same time. The cinematography is good. The culture is actually, like, the subset culture that they portrayed in queer culture was pretty accurate. It seemed to flow in that regards, but at the same time it missed the mark because there was so much potential of what this could have been. And I think that's why American Horror Story is doing it now, because I can see there are ties between the two in some ways, but doing it a little bit more steady hand. It's Ryan Murphy, so Ryan Murphy does 4 storylines at once and go, but it somehow ties in.
No, absolutely, my man. Well, without further ado, I think we get on to the penultimate segment. What do you think, Jesse?
I think it's the end of the flick as we know it.
And I feel a lot better than I thought I would, but not great.
And now, for the moment you've been waiting for, it's the end of the flick as we know it! No, seriously, get out. Go on. Get. Shoot. It's the end of the flick as we know it, so we will give you everything else that we happen to come across about this movie. Any little trivia questions that we have, we'll give you our final thoughts. We will rate it on the sour scale like we always do. Yes, Jared, there is a sour scale. We will get to that shortly. First and foremost, the box office of this one. It was not great. So, I mean, I say it wasn't great. It wasn't bad either because the budget was around 11 million.
All right.
In film, you with advertising costs and stuff like that, once you add that into it, you need to bake about double your budget. Otherwise, you didn't make money. This film made 19.8 million.
It almost broke even.
Almost broke even.
So it did a Blumhouse way of doing it.
Pretty much. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of that money went to Al Pacino. I mean, this is at a time when Al Pacino is one of the hottest names around. So
I don't know, man. Ed O'Neill was in there for a hot minute. Al Bundy himself.
Yeah, dude. I couldn't believe it. He was one of the cops. That was fantastic.
Had to give him about $250K, you know. This was pre-Married with Children, though. But they knew. They knew. We all know.
I'm so trying to, that budget. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I mean, I will say for having only an $11 million budget, they made great use of it. I can see where the money went.
Right.
They didn't leave any of it on the table by any means. Like you said, it was kind of panned by both sides of the argument. You're very conservative people. You're very liberal. Your homosexual community, they did not like it either. But it did have a re-release in France, which was interesting.
A re-release?
Yeah, and that was as early as 2008. Its lifetime gross is almost 20 million. So like it almost it made maybe another like 800,000 in France, and that's about it. I don't know why.
Like when Infinity tried to drop Infinity War with bonus features where the Hulk looked like a PS2 character just so they could beat Avatar, and then Avatar just beat him again.
Yep, I remember that. Any trivia? Did you come across any trivia that you would like to share with the audience?
Well, black bears can run over 35 miles an hour.
About this film, Kieran.
Oh, no.
Well, okay. Let's see. 2 of the bars in the film were actually real bars. One was called the Mine Shaft, and the other one was the Eagle's Nest.
Why didn't they keep the Mine Shaft? That's a great name.
Right? These bars stayed open for a long time, and they actually filmed inside these bars. And eventually, because the homosexual community hated this movie so much, they eventually barred the director from ever entering the establishments again.
Oh, wow. I can see that.
Kick rocks, Billy Friedkin. Fuck you. There is a wealth, and I'm telling you, a wealth of content to be made about the gay mafia. I feel like I phrased that as a joke. I didn't. I feel like it could be the next fucking Western. You know what I mean?
All right, here is probably the greatest trivia fact about this movie. The 6'5" African-American man wearing a jockstrap and a cowboy hat is played by a real cop who really used to do this during certain interrogations. They did that in part so the perp would lose credibility when trying to complain about the detective's behavior. It was very extracurricular.
Just bare ass?
Apparently, he knew a guy who did this, and the reason why they did it was wanted to make a complaint against them. They said that a naked 6'5" black man came in and slapped him around. Nobody would take him seriously.
Oh, it's one of the, like, nobody's gonna believe you.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God.
That's crazy.
And now that makes that whole scene look a whole lot different to me. I'm just going to say that.
Yes, absolutely.
That's one of the points where you have like a stop and somebody comes in and explains that to you, because now I don't hate this movie as much.
Right. So, Kieran, what are your final thoughts about this film?
Okay, final thoughts about this movie. It's very aggressive. It is overly aggressive, in my personal opinion. I am not at liberty to say what is too aggressive in filmmaking, period. I don't think, unless it's painfully obvious. This doesn't happen to be in like the painfully obvious category, whereas like Lars von Trier shit can go. But it's certainly, it makes me it gives me ick for the amount of hyperviolence there is. But I can sympathize with the message. And I think watching a movie like Windows, per se, has made me realize, oh, I can see what trying to capitalize on queer violence is without any queer perspective, because that's what Windows was. It was fucking soulless. Whereas this is kind of gritty and hard to watch as it can be in places, does have a little bit of a soul. So I'm not as harsh on it, but I still don't love it. So if I were to put it on my sour scale, and Jared, if you haven't listened to the program before, which I'll be a little sad if you didn't, because you're fucking on it. But I understand if you haven't. The sour scale is where we rate this particular class of worst picture nominee. I'm going to go 1 through 10 here. Number 1 is a film called The Nude Bomb. Jared Shamoon, are you looking at me, Jared? Or are you looking at me? Look at me, Jared. Look me in my eyes. That's where I live.
Nude Bomb.
If watch this movie.
Say it to him as if you're saying it to a lover.
If you wanna, but I'm pretty empty inside, so you might be wasting your time. Watch this fucking movie. It is genuinely one of the wittiest things I've ever seen, and I think it was nominated for Worst Picture because I think the spirit of humor in that era was a little bit more mean-spirited and a little bit more marginalizing, and I think it wasn't as appreciated because it wasn't those things. It's a spy parody because it's Get Smart, but the movie, like from the original series from 1970, 10 years later they made a movie of it, and it's one of the wittiest things. And there's like certain misogynist spy moments, but I feel like they're making fun of those. And this is back in 1980, and it's kind of wholesome in places, and it's one of the funniest things I've ever fucking seen. If I got nothing else out of this podcast, they got that movie. Fuck you, Jesse. That's what I meant. I'm kidding. I love you. I look at your face. But number 1 is The Nude Bomb. Number 2 is Friday the 13th. We can skip the 3-minute speech about Friday the 13th. It's a classic, but I just like The Nude Bomb more. Number 3 is a film called Xanadu. Are you familiar with Xanadu, Jared?
Xanadu. No, I don't think I am.
It stars the late Olivia Newton-John as a sort of ethereal roller skater, and she seduces one of the guys from the Warriors, and it's a really fun musical with a bunch of electric light orchestra music, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But it's also got Gene Kelly, and I quite like Gene Kelly. Number 4 is going to be a film called Saturn III, which we described earlier. It's Kirk Douglas, Harvey Keitel, and who else?
Farrah Fawcett.
And Farrah Fawcett in space.
That's about all it is, because there's
a really funny looking killer robot. It's funny. Number 5 is a movie we just watched called The Formula, which I despise.
The Formula, is that like race cars?
That's what I thought.
You're kind of on the track there. So The Formula is actually a synthetic fuel formula. So it's a movie all about the fuel crisis and like them like creating a fuel crisis and not wanting to create a synthetic oil, because then all of these billionaires would no longer be billionaires and they would lose all of their money.
Yeah, that's my number 5. And number 6 is Raise the Titanic, which is a boring little slog fest. It's a hot pile of nothing about this like scavenger crew that's trying to raise the Titanic to, I don't even fucking remember what they were getting. But they were trying to get something off the Titanic before they knew that it split in half.
new form of plutonium that was better than plutonium, and like it got lost on the Titanic. Yeah, when the Titanic went down, this resource went down with it, and so like it became a battle between U.S. and Russia on who was going to raise the Titanic first to get this new element.
Was this like time traveling?
No,
No, it's boring shit. It's submarines. It's mostly submarines.
Yeah, and this was
See, it would have been so much better if it was like time travelers.
No. This was like very boring, very like Cold War movie.
Yeah.
And it was done before they ever found the Titanic. So like this was coming from the perspective like the Titanic was not ever put into pieces and stuff like that. Like it never broke in half and all of that. Like all of the lore that you hear about Titanic, like they didn't really put any of that in there.
It's what I imagine. It's what I imagine that James Cameron views as pornography.
Oh, James Cameron.
Exactly. But that's sitting at number 6. I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna put Cruising at 7.
Ooh.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Cruising at 7, which we all watched that, and I think then number 9 is The Jazz Singer, which is a remake of a very problematic film from the 1920s, and it's a only marginally less problematic film if they remade in 1980. And yes, Neil Diamond is in blackface. That's really all you need.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well.
That's all you need. That's kind of all you need to know about it.
Because when you think of jazz music, the first person that comes to your mind is Neil Diamond.
Ew, no. Ew.
Sweet Caroline. That's what they blast all the time in New Orleans. Go down to Bourbon Street. I guarantee you, they're all wearing red sequins tops.
Yeah, all joining hand in hand, singing "Coming to America."
But anywho, it's gross. But number 10 is the grossest film maybe ever. It's directed by a guy named Barry, who was Woody Allen's cinematographer exclusively. So that pretty much tells you everything you need to know about the nature of this film.
He also he was the cinematographer for The Godfather. All right, don't
fuck Woody Allen. Fuck Woody Allen and everything he's about and everybody he ever.
All right, but don't disparage Barry because of it. All right, the motherfucker was a cinematographer for one of the greatest movies ever goddamn made. All right.
Are we really having this argument, Jesse?
I'm just saying, like you're really marginalizing the guy.
I don't need Woody Allen context. I need this fucking film he directed. You don't defend this asshole Barry to me, you motherfucker. I don't think he even really feels this. He's just trying to fucking rile me up.
He's got, okay, you have to understand, Jared. We figured out over the course of these first few episodes of this podcast that Kieran has this certain hatred for anybody named Barry.
Not anybody named Barry. The guy who fucking shot fucking Friday the 13th, his name was Barry. I didn't have a problem with him.
No, you did have a problem with him at some point because you kept like just bury this and bury that.
Hey, that's just the way I say Barry.
You just say it aggressively, and I'm like, who hurt you? Like
a lot of fucking people, all right?
I think it was someone named Barry.
It wasn't anybody named Barry. His name
I was about to say, was your camp counselor named Barry? Shit, man. My final thoughts are gonna echo you guys. This film is problematic, but not as problematic as, say, Windows. Jared, give Windows a try and you'll understand what we're talking about here.
Don't give Windows a try. Do not. No, I had to spend money on Amazon, so that probably went to somebody. No.
This film, though, like, I feel like it had a lot to say. I feel like it tried to wake the audience up with its visceralness, and I think that's the reason why they tried to use that. But I think they hammered in on a few points that are more than problematic.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole idea of the killer queer, and then, the whole idea that because he's starting to feel like these gay feelings and stuff like that, he's starting to, like, it's a question now of if he's a killer. And then the whole dynamic with him and his girlfriend and how he's not able to be sexually attracted to her because he's going too deep undercover. You know, you had some really, really good things to say about like how queer communities are being abused during that time. But you also overlaid it with this sense of the killer queer and these violent acts to try and get your point across, which I think you just hung in there a little too long, like with the stabbing scenes and stuff like that. I think they just stayed with it a little too long. Same thing with Windows. Whenever they were doing the rape scene with Windows, they just kept us in that room in that moment for about 20 seconds longer than we needed to be. I think that if I was to place this one on the sour scale, and Jared, this is where you'll get to see that our sour scales have skewed a little bit, but we're kind of on the same track. So he puts The Nude Bomb at number one. He thinks it's a better film and stuff like that. He enjoys the hell out of it, and I do too. I think if you like movies like Austin Powers and The Naked Gun, right up your alley. Right up your alley. It's a very good film. But my number one film that I think is actually a really, really good movie, and it spurred so many sequels and stuff, is Friday the 13th. I mean, you have to respect the film. You have to respect what it was able to garner, the audience that it was able to achieve, and not to mention it's such an iconic movie with like its sounds and sights. And a lot of people don't even know like the holiday of Friday the 13th. Whenever they relate Friday the 13th, they relate it to the hockey mask, the machete, the sounds of the you know, that's what they relate all of that to. So I would have to put Friday the 13th at number one because of that, and because some of the kills still work to this day, like the killing with like the arrow going through Kevin Bacon's neck and you seeing the blood squirt out, like that stuff still worked. So that would definitely be my pick for like best film that we've had for this year of 1980. You know, as far as films that were nominated for this award, it was the one to me that did not deserve to be in here. I think Friday the 13th was just put into this nomination just because they needed a horror film to be part of this award process. To me, it really had no business. It was a hit. I mean, it made money, you know, and over time it's made millions, if not billions of dollars with all of its sequels. So my second film would have to be The Nude Bomb. It's funny. It's really, really funny. And you can't find it anywhere. You can't find it on Amazon. You can't find it on any type of streaming service. I had to look it up online, and I'm sorry, I had to rip it for free because I couldn't find it fucking anywhere. I couldn't even rent it. I wanted to rent it, but I couldn't rent it. So you forced my hand.
You can find like a DVD on Amazon or something.
Yeah, something. But so my third film would have to be Xanadu, Along with You. Xanadu's fun, you know, it's relatively harmless, but it's silly. I think that the whole plot structure of it and like what they were trying to say was just not there. They were trying to make a musical, and they were trying to make something that was out there, and they were trying to use graphics that weren't ready yet, because I mean they do green screen, Jared, and I swear to God you can see the green lines like around them. Like, yeah,
I hate it right now.
Yeah. And then, you know, they're in front of green screen. And so like, and it's a roller skating film. So like they're doing the hustle on roller skates in front of the Hollywood sign.
No, they are not.
Like pushing 70 in this movie. And he's still going perfect.
Was it campy intended for that? Or was it like, were they trying to be serious?
It's in the eye of the beholder sort of situation. Like, oh yeah, that's how it's supposed to look. That makes your viewing better. I think they'll like that. But I think it was meant to be serious.
And you can tell that they had a lot of fun during production with that one. You know, it was filled with a lot of singing, dancing, cocaine. Anyways, number 4 would have to be Saturn 3. Also a lot of cocaine. But yeah, a lot of Kirk Douglas man ass. And I mean, we're talking Michael Douglas is like an actor at this point. So, you know, his dad is probably in his 60s and Farrah Fawcett's in her 20s. So, you know, they're supposed to be a love interest together, and it's just weird. There's a robot in it, and it's kind of like a Hannibal Lecter-esque robot. Like at one point it tries to wear somebody's skin over itself. Yeah. Still not a great movie. And then my number 5 matches Kieran as well. It's going to be The Formula. The Formula is relatively harmless, but fuck is it boring, man. Like there's just nothing about it that keeps you intrigued with it. There's nothing about the storyline that like makes me want to know who done it, you know. And that's what this movie is that it's a murder mystery who done it, and there's this formula involved, and it's a commentary on the oil industry and these rich tycoons that don't want to give up their power. And it's actually still kind of relevant to today's time. And that's the only reason why I actually hold it above Race the Titanic, is because it's still relevant, because we still have an oil crisis today and we still are slaves to fucking oil tycoons and shit like that. I'm not going to get political on this podcast, but you know what I mean. So that's the reason why that I still hold it above Race the Titanic. Race the Titanic is a boring fucking watch. It's just watching muddy water is all it is. It's just them looking through. It's just looking through a lens that's underwater, and it's dark and it's muddy, and they're just trying to find something, and all of a sudden they bump into something. They're like, I don't know what that is. And they turn, oh, it's nothing. Move forward. And then not to mention the fact that it's not timely, because this was even before they ever like discovered where the Titanic was. They didn't discover where the Titanic was until 1985. This movie came out in 1980. So there's no social relevance to today or anything like that. I just didn't like the film. And then you tried to make the film into a Cold War-esque movie, which didn't need to be shoehorned.
We already have Star Wars.
After Race the Titanic at number 6, I would have to put, okay, so this is where me and Kieran are going to differ right now. So I would actually put The Jazz Singer next. And the only reason why is because The Jazz Singer is silly. It's stupid. Why are they calling it The Jazz Singer when Neil Diamond is not jazz music whatsoever? But besides the blackface of it all, it's not very problematic. I mean, yes, that is problematic.
The words just came out of your mouth.
I know what came out of my mouth, but hear me out. No, hear me out. And the only reason why I say that is because the rest of the film has none of that in it. It's literally the first 5 minutes of the fucking film. You see him in blackface. He gets kicked out of the club for wearing blackface, and then he never does that again. And then the rest of the movie is relatively harmless, because Neil Diamond's just a fucking guy who sings in a church, in a synagogue, and then he ends up trying to go to California and make it, and he does make it, and then he finds a girl lies there, but he's still married, but he doesn't screw around with the girl while he's married, so he's still a good guy, you know? Like, there wasn't a whole lot of...
I counter that with there's racial subtext throughout that movie. I don't think it's a coincidence he sings about Robert E. Lee amongst his group of black friends. I don't think it's a coincidence that there's a couple of Confederate flags in the movie. That's just me, though.
No, fair enough. And I mean, agree to disagree on that one, you know. But then I guess the next one that would be in my sour scale would have to be this movie, Cruising, because it's problematic throughout. Like, it may have some good things to say, but the problematic points that it had, and then the very problematic, the whole linchpin of this entire plot really was not executed very well. And like I said, it seemed like it was shoehorned in there. They didn't believe in their landing with them capturing the actual serial killer and him living happily ever after. They didn't have a lot of trust and faith that was going to play well. So it seemed like it was just shoehorned in there, and it was the wrong play. It was absolutely the wrong play. And that's the reason why I would still hold it to be worse than The Jazz Singer, because besides that one blackface scene, which is god awful, the rest of the movie is relatively harmless.
Yeah, and I can't see that argument, because it's definitely not as visceral as the problematic nature of Cruising.
And that's where we get into Windows, is because it's such a problematic film, and the way that they show and the aggression behind like the rape scene and like the whole idea, like from beginning to end of that movie, it is about a lesbian serial killer who doesn't know how to come out to her lover. So she ends up having a man rape her lover. So she is no longer into men. That's literally the fucking premise of that film. And it's absolutely terrible.
You see why we hate Barry, Jared?
I'm Barry.
What? No. I don't like that.
All right. So we have reached the end of this, but I do want to introduce a new segment this week. And Kieran, I haven't even really gone over this with you as of yet, but I really feel like, we do this podcast because we want to learn something, right? And we feel that you can learn just as much from a bad movie as you can a good movie. So I believe that we need to end before we go into our Plugs Not Drugs segment, which I know we're all fiending for that segment there. But I feel like we need this little segment in between there that we just simply call, What Did You Learn? So I'm going to start with our guest, Kieran. Fuck off. Go have a smoke break.
Actually, that's not a bad
Hey,
idea. I got a pack of
hey.
L&M's right here because I'm a cheap hooah.
There you go. So you go have your smoke break and I will talk to Jared for a second. Jared, my man.
Okay, but I'm scared you're going to talk shit while I'm gone.
I will. It's just a given. All right, you Kramer looking motherfucker.
You want to go. Jesse
And he sits
want to
back
go.
down. All right, go smoke your cigarette. Jared, back on us. All right.
Well, what?
So,
Whatever, Cousin Eddie.
So for people out there, how I actually got to know my good friend Jared here was he was actually in film school with me and Kieran. So we all went to the University of North Texas and we got our film degrees because we're gluttons for punishment. And he was in our classes with us and he has worked with us on several films, including my short film Protector. Me and him actually made a music video together with my good buddies over at Righteous Kill. And we also did a short documentary together. And I can't remember. Is that everything? Or I feel like we did one more thing?
I feel like we've done so much because we did a lot of projects together. I think that's about it. But we did stuff with each other in our video tech classes. Like we helped each other with that as well. So
bottom line is that we've taken this friendship outside the classroom, and now he is part of my production crew whenever I have any of my films going on. He was unfortunately able to be part of our award-winning short film, Daddy's Girl, because unfortunately we had to do it during COVID times. And at that point in time, Mr. Jared Shamoon did have COVID. I'm glad he pulled through, but we were saddened that he was not able to be part of our crew that time. And it happened to be the one that we won some awards on.
I know. We've done so many great works. And I was still to this day, I hate the universe for making me miss that moment. But it is what it is.
That's all right. You're definitely going to be with us on our next one, which I'm super excited about. We have it coming up here very soon. Before we get to that, though, I just have to ask you, we are at the end of this film, and we do this podcast because we believe that you can learn just as much from a bad movie as you can a good movie. We want to take this time just to reflect for a moment, and I just want to ask you, what'd you learn? What'd you learn from this movie?
What have I learned? I learned at some point studios approved more than I thought they approved in the sense because I know it is for queer cinema, it is you don't see as much stuff with especially like gay romances or queer romances and stuff like that. Like them introducing a gay character is somehow still a big thing today in 2022. And so to see them full on fisting someone in a bar in an 80s film, I was actually very surprised. So I do appreciate that we do need to take more grit with films in the sense of like do something like not exactly fisting someone, but taking the grit to do something different and pushing the envelope of for the audience to set the tone. At the same time, I do think there is a lot of I do wish they had this set up so different. I could tell they were trying to do like a cop film, but like a little off the note with the gay culture, with the murder tie-in. It felt like they kind of watched like a cop film, watched Friday the 13th or a horror film, and was like, you know what? We should make those two somehow together. It could have been really, really good because there could have been a lot of pivotal moments in Pacino's life, or in Al Pacino's like moment of his character would be like realizing there is more to him than just being straight. There is more to him than just being an officer. Like he starts finding who he really is and then solving this case. And I wish they were so graphic with the gay scenes that I honestly wish they were more graphic with the horror scenes. I wish there was more of a build up and everything, especially like when what was it? The individual who was the cross-dresser informative, they were talking to the detective and was like, well, yeah, they made a weird noise and made like an elementary noise, like an elementary like mumble like before the murder. And I'm like, where was that? Where was the eeriness? Where was the drama of it all? So that's what I think I've learned from this film is that I think that's why I didn't rate it as low as I could have. I'm not a fan of this film, but like I said, I've seen worse films. And I think since I see so much potential that could have been, it's still problematic as can be, but there could have been something. And that's what makes me mad. It's like there could have been.
Word. And I agree with you. And I'll elaborate a little bit more here in just a minute, but I'm just going to go on to Kieran. Kieran, are you back from your smoke break?
What I learned was I don't necessarily get everything all the time, and that's not bad. But I do think I understand when certain things are a bit harsh. And I think this flick was a little harsh in places where it didn't necessarily need to be. And that was my number one issue with Windows. I didn't have it as much with this one, but it was still there in places for me. And I learned that Al Pacino certainly went places for his craft.
No, I mean, I agree with you because, I mean, this was a different character than I've seen him in. That might have been the reason why he took on this role, because it is something that you wouldn't see someone of his caliber doing, especially at this stage of his career and where he was at. Kudos to him there for taking the risk. I think he showed up and he showed out because he was, that's the thing is that honestly, I can't say anything bad about the acting of this movie. Like usually with our films, I can usually pinpoint that and be like, that was a terrible line. That was a terrible fucking delivery, that type of thing. But everybody played their roles very well.
Right. Yeah.
And I will at least give it that. But I think that what I learned from this film myself is I learned that you need to have faith in your original premise, because there is a good film there. There's a really, really good film about somebody who is like not a homophobe, but not, he doesn't dabble in that world and he has to go undercover and be part of this. And then I think they should have leaned more into him trying to portray a gay man and be part of this gay culture, and then them start to suspect him to not be part of the culture, to bring him in and stuff, and for him to be part of that BDSM, because it's kind of like you have to know the right passcode to get into this culture and to get in this club, that type of thing. And he struggles to get in there, and it's dealing with him having to like, well, what is a gay man and what do I have to do to portray a gay man, that type of thing. And, make light of it. You're a detective and you're doing undercover work, and you may get killed at any point in time for being who you are and stuff like that. So there's that whole nervousness around it. Your killer queer of the psychopath that's killed so many people, to me, still works for this film because it is within the homosexual community. It's like Jeffrey Dahmer was a homosexual himself and he went to the homosexual community,
Yes,
so like you have to throw that into consideration, but keep with that premise, make that the central goal and not lose faith in it at the very end. Like if you really were dissatisfied with how the ending happened, you should have elongated the kill scene. Like let them go through the woods. And also, I think there should have been a lot more leaning into Al Pacino's character struggling with how he's seeing his fellow officers treat gay people. And they didn't lean into that. You know, he kind of saw what was happening and stuff like that, but he kept his head down and he didn't fucking say anything and he didn't make a commentary on it.
Oh yeah, the first officer that actually gave a shit. You know what? We need to stop these murders. Cool. That's all we needed.
Exactly. And then instead of taking that route, this film decides to put a question mark at the end of, well, he might be the killer. And that's not what I wanted for his character. I don't think that's what anybody wanted for his character. And it's not like a Usual Suspects thing where it's like, oh, fuck, that's brilliant. And it makes him look so smart. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It doesn't fit right.
No, I understand what you're saying because seeing Pacino's face like in the mirror, it looked like he went through something. In my opinion, it looked a little sinister, like he recovered, but also like a little bit of an evil eye.
He'll never get rid of the gayness.
that part, I like. It felt like
the gayness has entered him, and it will never be the same.
Right, and that's I wonder if that's what it meant when the wife was putting on the leather stuff. Like it's still a part of him, in the sense like trauma passes on trauma. Unless you heal from it, the premise of like I caused you this, you're gonna do this now. Like the transferring of energy from one to another. It went on from the gay murder to possibly him kind of scenario. I don't know. That's what I sense that you were trying to hint at. Like he formed his trauma and now is about to do that. I don't know.
Yeah, and I guess that's where they were going with it, but why? It didn't need to be there. You already had this. You already had this semi-rocky plot to begin with that you were kind of taking the whole wrong angles with, and then that's what you choose to do with it. Do either of you guys have anything else that y'all want to say about this film?
Not a goddamn thing.
Well, we went cruising, we got a bruising, and I will say I hope we take more chances in the sense of queer art, but not in this direction. I hope we get approved for more extreme stuff in the sense of what they did in the gay clubs, but not necessarily like I want a better story. Like I want, like if you're gonna make me watch like let's have this play out. Like where are we going?
I think this is a perfect time to transition to our next segment, plugs, not drugs.
Man, fuck these drugs. I think it's time to spread some plugs. You got those plugs? Hey man, let me get some of them plugs. I'd sell you this Bible for a plug.
All right, this is the point in the show in which Jesse and myself and our first ever guest, Jared, if he so happens to want to, will plug whatever they have going outside of this podcast, be it art, music, sports, like they own a Benihana or something, like plug whatever you want. So I'm going to go first. I always have my band, Radio War, RADIOWORE. We're going to spell it for you about 8 times if you ever come to a live show. Check us out. Fund everything, rod and reels all the time. Buy the T-shirts. We want to make some movies for you. We want to make some stuff for you. Jared, do you have anything that you would like to plug?
Right now, I'm working on a YouTube channel and a TikTok channel. I haven't posted anything yet, but I finally have down, after several attempts, a wonderful logo because why not? So my YouTube and TikTok will soon be the Mumbling Minion, and y'all could find me on YouTube and TikTok. I am hoping to create wonderful movie reviews, do offside talking, comedy skits, just a little bit of old YouTube style, you can say.
Hell yeah, man.
Well, I ain't got much to plug. It's just the usual stuff. Go to the tpublic.com and buy some of our shirts. It helps us with all of our productions that we have going on. Also, we are still in pre-production for Campfire Cravings. So please go and to the GoFundMe campaign for that. It's gofundme.com/Campfire Cravings. And also, we always have this podcast as well. Be sure to subscribe and listen every week. couple weeks whenever we have a new episode drop. We are almost done with the year 1980, so hopefully here very soon we will be transitioning into a new year with a new crop of films for us to enjoy or hate or loathe or whatever it is that we love or hate about them. So unless you guys have anything else, I think we are done for the day, don't y'all?
I think so.
Well, Jared, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you for stopping by and joining us on this episode. You were very insightful and helpful to us with this film. So thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate y'all.
I think that's all the berries worth picking, my friend.
We'll see you in the fields next week. Bye for now.
You've been listening to Raspberry Fields Forever, a Rod and Reels podcast. Available on Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever else you receive your podcast. You can go to the website www.rodandreels.com for even more content. Thanks for listening.
Get off the stage already!